Hi, I'm Ryan Glover with Glover Nursery, and we're going to talk a little bit about how to plant trees and shrubs in the heat during the summertime where you can still have success. So one of the big questions we ask, once it starts to heat up is it safe to plant? Can I still plant? And yes, you can, and you can be very successful. All the trees and shrubs and plants that we have in the nursery are ready to be planted. They're not being dug up after you order them or anything that's, can really cause them stress. If they're in the containers, if they're in flats, if they're balled in burlap sitting in our yard, they can be planted. Now it does take a little bit of extra care in the heat, specifically how you water them and handle them, but there's no reason not to plant. So a few things to think about. Number one is sprinklers. This does not water plants, ever. Pop-up sprinklers like this, spray sprinklers, even your drips for a newly planted plant, that's not going to be adequate. You'll need to hose water those unless the drip line is all new plants where you can water them all the same, because new plants, especially in the summertime, are going to need additional water, as opposed to an established plant that's already on your drip line or already in your sprinklers. Your sprinklers can work good for established plants, but for new plants, it needs to be done with a hose in your yard. So the best way to accomplish that when you plant a new plant like this is build a nice catch basin around it with this excess soil that you have. Plant the plant, put it in. You need to soak that soil around the root ball really well. So what we recommend doing and our installers do is you backfill that soil, turn the hose on about halfway, so it's coming out strong but not spraying across the yard. Stick that down in the soil and let it run. What that does is that fills up all that soil profile, settles that soil, gets the big air gaps out of there, and really on that initial planting soaks that water, soaks the soil, gets that water all the way down through the soil profile and settles it in there. And then you can go ahead and take that excess soil and just create like a donut shape around the root ball to where you have a little bit of a berm, 2 to 3 inch berm around the plant that will catch and hold the water. And then on top of that, you can go ahead and add your mulch. So you don't need to leave this berm forever. After a few months, it kind of settles and you can go ahead and rake it out, once the plants are established. But that really makes a big difference on how you can water the plant. So once you have your berm established for your plants, the best way to water is take your hose, lay it in your dish, turn it on slowly, and depending on the size of the tree, let it run anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes. And if it's a really large tree, sometimes even an hour. That's why you want to run it slow so that water slowly drains down through that entire root ball. Because if you just water it real quick, you may only get water this deep into the root ball or this deep into the root ball. Well, there's roots all the way down to the bottom. So when you water, that water needs to penetrate all the way down to the bottom of that root ball to water it correctly. So to just go and take your hose with your thumb and spray the top of it for what you think is a long time, which may only be 20 seconds, and the water pools up on top this much and it seems like you watered it, that's not going to be enough water for that tree. You need to make sure that water gets all the way down to the bottom of that root ball. So that dish you created, you may need to fill that up 3 to 5 times if you're going to water it real quick with your garden hose and you don't have time to deep soak it to get that water to go down, or let it run. A great trick I use and I always recommend is set the timer on your phone while it's running so you don't forget. That's a big key. Just set it 30 minutes so your timer goes off and so to go switch or to your other plants. Okay, so right here we have a good range of sizes of plants. So this is in a 1 gallon container, but you can see how large this plant is. So that's going to need to be watered, differently than, this tree right here where the container matches the tree a little bit closer. So, on something like this, if you plant it in the ground, that's going to be much easier to hand water. You can let it run on a slow trickle for 10 minutes, depending on your soil conditions, and that should be adequate. You bump up to a little bit higher, you know, you're going to be more 15 minutes on that one, on, you know, a slow trickle. You know, this is every few days, unless it's you plant in the hottest part of the summer, then you want to check it more often. But if you go up to this size container, that one, minimum 20 minutes to 30 minutes on a slow trickle is what I would recommend. And then if you bump up right here to a larger size, that's where the arbor rain tower comes in handy. You fill that whole thing up with water, and it slowly drains out over 5 to 8 hours, so it does the work for you. You don't need to leave your hose there. So that's a great option. But if you were to hose water that, minimum half an hour when you water. And so, you know, this is going to be, you know, typically a couple times a week if it's newly planted in the heat. But the first season, no matter the plant, you want to get that well established, because even if it is a more drought tolerant plant, the first year when it's establishing its roots is always a little more temperamental than the plant's natural habit is going to be. Typical one we see a lot is barberry, potentilla. Two great shrubs, very, you know, can be very drought tolerant once they're established, but that first season we see a lot of problems with inadequate watering in that first season, especially on drip systems. And then, you know, you're gonna have either cut it back if you get the leaves dry up on you, or have more issues. So once again, if you're planting a plant on a drip system, that's not a cure-all for plants. You still need to monitor and maintain those plants. Drips are great, but they still require maintenance, and you still have to check on the plants. So we get asked also if there's a different watering technique for trees versus shrubs. And it's not really so much different technique, it's just the length of time. You still want to water the same way, it's just how long you let that water run for. You know, the best thing is always a slow trickle on the root ball. Let that water slowly drain through the whole root ball. Never just really quick on the surface and go to the next one, because that water's not going to go drain through the root ball. A lot of our waterers here, they're trained in a row of 10 plants. You can hit each plant and let the water drain and go back and hit it again if there's not enough room for soil in that pot, so that way you get the water to go down through that whole soil profile. And one more thing about watering your plants, new or existing, just try to direct the water to the root ball. I know it's really tempting to want to spray the leaves and spray everywhere, unless you're knocking off aphids or things like that, where water spray can be really helpful. It's not really beneficial to the plants. It's just better to direct that water to the root ball. So that's what we would recommend to do. All right, to summarize, number one, don't just entirely trust your sprinkling system to water your new plants. Number two, when you do plant a new plant, use the hose to settle that soil and saturate it completely when you first plant it. Number three, add mulch around the top of the plant to retain moisture and eliminate weeds. Number four, if you're planting trees, an arborane tower that slowly deep soaks over hours is going to help you a lot. And then number five, when you go out and you are watering, a slow trickle from your hose, anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes is best. Don't worry about spraying the leaves and watering really quickly. Slowly is best, just like good barbecue. Good luck.